Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so glad that you all are here, and I'm thrilled to be able to welcome you to the Spring Symposium and introduce our keynote speaker. Before I do so, I just want to say some quick thanks for folks who really helped make this happen. First, to our Provost office for helping to fund this event. Thank you to Vice Provost Julie Whitlow for being such a champion of this effort, and others from the CTI. Leadership is a team sport. I heard in a podcast yesterday, and I'm going with that. I'm really proud of my team of instructional designers and faculty fellows, as well as colleagues, Derek Barr in the back and Gail Rankin, who I think ran to put out another fire, but jumped in to help with everything. We really couldn't have done it without them. There's no way that this setup would be happening if left to me being in charge here. So thank you. And a special thanks to Cami Condi, faculty fellow, who really, really led this charge when we started thinking about, I knew I wanted to do something in the spring to sort of bring folks together. We were still hoping, yes, an in-person thing would be possible. And when we really tried to put our heads together and think about what might make sense for our community at this point in time, what kinds of things are students experiencing, where are faculty at? We started this year in September. I remember thinking, we don't even really know if we're going to be in person all year. Anything could happen. So we've really been through quite a bit since we got to this point. So thank you for Cami and sort of helping lead that charge and having us think about trauma-informed pedagogy. And I just wanted to say one more thing. I'll get right to you, Yvonne. I went to the conference this past March, and the keynote speaker referred to our current state of affairs for undergrads, that they're experiencing this sort of perma crisis, that there's, yes, the pandemic, but also climate change and gun violence and increasing rates of hate crimes, and like sort of the list goes on. And so they're experiencing this. And as faculty and staff here, we're sort of experiencing that too. And some folks are calling this term like a secondary trauma. And we're spending a lot of energy caring for our students, but we also really have to think about caring for ourselves. And so I hope that you have time to rest and to recharge, and to give yourselves grace this summer and always, this is not my quote either, but it's above my desk where I work, is grace is the difference or the space between what you think you have to do and what you're really able to do. And so thinking about giving ourselves grace and in each other and our students, that we have the ability to influence how others are feeling, and by being in community with one another. So I'm feeling that today, and thank you all for your grace and for all of your help in making this happen. So thank you for letting me steal the stage for a second. I'm so excited to have Yvonne here tonight, today. Can you tell it's been a long day? Like, I've been up for so long, it's like evening. A first generation college graduate, Dr. Hernandez Friedman currently serves as the Vice President for Student Affairs at Coastal Carolina University. Her previous position was the inaugural Assistant Vice President of Student Engagement at the University of Houston Clear Lake. Among her responsibilities has been implementing a student engagement program that promotes equity and inclusion, leadership and involvement across 4 areas: scholarship and academic achievement, social responsibility, community engagement, and career development. Hernandez Friedman's background includes working at the University of California, San Diego State University, and Arizona State University. Dr. Hernandez Friedman is a certified diversity executive and has a passion for creating inclusive spaces where a campus community can thrive. A formally trained life and career coach, Dr. Hernandez Friedman earned both a bachelor's degree in political science and an MEd in higher and post-secondary education from Arizona State University, and a PhD in educational equity and social justice from Claremont Graduate University in California. Did I get that on? Okay, you got it. So without further ado, I want to welcome Dr. Hernandez Friedman for her keynote titled Wholeness, harmony, social justice, and liberation, creating a validating educational environment.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Hello. Just want to make sure. Hello. Thank you, Derek, for the extra mic. I was like, no, I'm just going to stand around here. But he said, in case you want to move around, here's an extra mic. So he seemed to get me already so well. So thank you to Eliza and Cami and the Center for Teaching Inclusive Excellence, so teaching and innovation. And I wanted to say thank you so much for the invitation to come and speak and really enjoying the conversation and all of the innovation that is happening around creating trauma-informed spaces and being inclusive and equitable in teaching practices. Looking at the poster presentations, sitting in on one of the lightning round situations, it really showed this passion for trying to create an environment that is not only inclusive, but is liberating and looking at education from a democratic framework. So I think that's a really important piece. I'm gonna do my share screen here for our friends at home. There we go. Make this silly thing go away. Oh, there we go. I'm gonna do that for me. That's all right. We will play on through. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am and how I interact with education and how I've interacted as an undergraduate student, as well as a graduate student, and now as an educator myself. So like my bio said, I am a first generation college student. I identify as Latina and I use she, her, ella pronouns. And I was born in a border town called Nogales, Arizona. And I can honestly say that I knew nothing about education. My parents did not go to college. And we don't want to advance here. Let's see. There we go. Now we're going to advance. There we go. So I got a couple of quotes here, and let's see if I can move this around. There we go. So I'm just gonna. So I just put a couple of quotes up here that I thought that I wanted to share. But again, I was born in a border town and knew nothing about the higher education system. I remember getting a scholarship, and my parents thought that I was automatically admitted to the university. And then we found out I wasn't. This was July before my freshman year of college in 1995. And so I don't know how, but I got into the University of Arizona. I think because I graduated with a high school diploma at that time, it was like automatic admit. So I think that's why I was able to walk away that day and actually be let into the university. But as far as housing, I was way late for that. I was late for all the things, and it was just a bit of a disaster. I rolled up to my freshman year of college. There were computers in 95, but I showed up with a Smith Corona word processor typewriter situation. And so I was still using a typewriter to do my papers. My first email account I didn't get until I was 23 years old. So if you ever email me, it's YvonneH23@hotmail.com, because I am still using the same email address that I did 20 something years ago. So it really has been a journey for me. Probably my toughest degree was the bachelor's degree, because there were so many things I had to navigate and so many things my parents and family did not understand or even know how to deal with my education or how to support me. And at that time, there was a lot of other identity things going on, because growing up in the 70s, being a Latina and Spanish was my original language. My parents made a valiant effort to make sure that I had no accent, and we stopped speaking Spanish in the house. And so it was a time where I was also reclaiming identity. So there was just a lot of different things going on for me. I also, unfortunately, ended up getting academically disqualified from the University of Arizona, hence why I wound up at Arizona State. So had to have a few years of growth in between going to the community college and then figuring out what the next step was. And so it was a bumpy ride. And so I say all that for you to know that many of your students are also on this bumpy ride. You may have been on it yourself, but it's always important that we remember some of the things that our students are going through, so that way we can provide for their growth throughout their collegiate career. So I'm just putting up a few quotes that just spoke to me when I was developing this presentation. It just felt like. So before I wanted to get started, in talking about trauma and in talking about wholeness, many of those concepts, they come from our Native people. And so I always want to take some time to acknowledge the native lands that we sit on, and that we are privileged to be working in. And I wanted to just take a quick moment to acknowledge that, and to remember that a lot of these agreements of knowing, they come from an Indigenous perspective. So just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that. So I want you to do a quick write for me. So if you have a moment, grab a piece of paper, it could be anything. What would a validating educational environment look like in your classroom? You can pick, if you teach many different types of courses, just pick one in your mind. And then I would follow up with that to say, what makes you nervous about applying this concept? So I'd like you to now turn to your neighbor. Unfortunately, my friends online are not able to turn to a neighbor, but you can put it in the chat for you all to see. But if you could turn to a quick neighbor that's very close to you and share your quick thoughts about what a validating educational environment looks like in your classroom, and what makes you nervous about applying this concept. So go ahead and take 2 minutes to just chat. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap up. Thank you. I hate to cut off sharing because it sounds like folks are sharing their thoughts. I want you to hold on to these thoughts, because hopefully at the end, you can go back to them and maybe grab a few different things, or maybe it's something you hold on to till the end of the symposium, and see if you can get to a place where maybe you don't feel nervous, and that creating that validating educational environment, you can start to piece together what that looks like for you in your classroom and within your discipline. So I want to talk about the agreements we have within education, and it's this agreement of separation. And we need this in order to provide context. If any of you have ever had the pleasure of reading Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, he talks at great length about the agreement of separation within education. It's a short book, but don't be fooled. It is dense. It is one of those books I read, and then I had to read another book about that book, and then read the book again. So I read it a few times, And it really is very dense material, but it's really wonderful information. So if in all of your spare time this summer, between all the things that you're doing, if you have an opportunity to read that, it's wonderful. But again, one of the agreements of the separation within education is that information only flows from teacher to student. But the reality is that if we are looking at a democratic model of education, that is a free flow between student and educator. And so we have this agreement within education that there is a separation. And where we can create innovation is when we can either close the gap on separation or remove it entirely. Faculty are sole experts in the classroom. Again, that is an agreement of separation, that the faculty member shows up and is the all-knowing expert, and that there is nothing to gain from the student. We are dumping information into little vessels and having them regurgitate what we've taught as a measure of success. That is as an agreement of separation within education. And we also talk about that teaching is separated from learning. Think about that for a minute. We are teaching things, but we're not quite certain if there is actual growth and learning happening. I could tell from some of the poster presentations that there are some incredibly thoughtful faculty members who are doing their very best to figure out what the learning part is. But there are so many other spaces where we're not really gauging if there's learning. We're just putting information out there. Also, another agreement of separation is this idea that faculty, that we don't need to outreach to our students. But the reality is that where we can create wholeness in our educational environment is when we actually take the time to talk to students, and not just during office hours. How do we find those times to engage with a student? When you walk past a student and you ask, how are you today? How are you really? Or, gosh, I haven't seen you in a couple of class periods. What's going on, right? And creating that connection. And that is not coddling students. Sometimes folks get into that space. Well, they're here, they should know better, they need to know how to navigate the university. But if you had me as an undergraduate, I had no clue what was happening. I was just showing up, sometimes showing up, other times not, and no one cared. And so I just floundered. There are many of our students that are like me. So having caring and encouraging conversations is an important piece. And the lack of that is an agreement of separation within education. Also, that's, again, students study subject matter from a distance, and that everything is done in isolation of one another. We're not always doing the best job of trying to say, okay, you're in math class. Let's teach you a math concept. What did you learn from your sociology class that maybe you can bring into this space to try to piece this together? And that takes collaborative conversations amongst faculty in spaces like this to create that dynamic bit of learning. And then again, one of the agreement of separation is that students, they don't learn to solve problems cross-disciplinary. So these are some of the agreements within of separation within education. And it is not only, for many students, this separation, it's dominating. It feels very dominating and overwhelming for our students. And so this is why it's really important that we acknowledging that this separation exists, and that we can create that liberating democratic classroom when we start to break down or remove the separation that occurs for students. So there are other agreements that we have within education. One of those first agreements is the agreement of competition. How does that show up in higher education? Well, one, it shows up as merit and as good grades. That is the agreement of competition. I'm going to feed you information, you are going to send it back, and I'm going to grade you on it. Now, this is the reality, is that we're not going to walk away here and break down the grading system, right? But what you can control in your classroom is how we get to that place of getting that grade. Can we do that through collaborative work? Can we do that through a one ongoing assignment throughout the academic semester? How can we get to that competition? How can we engage in that, creating that collaborative learning environment so that we can break down the agreement of competition? Perfection. I will tell you that I can honestly say I am a recovering perfectionist, and probably many of you are like me or still in the cycle of perfection. And where does that come up for us? It comes up for us mostly, I mean, for students as well, because you have so many students coming in and they're putting so much pressure on themselves to be perfect, whatever perfect means. We do that too. Coming into an academic space and thinking we have to be the all-knowing expert of all the things, and we have to be perfect and know it all. And then that ego, which is what drives perfection, then doesn't allow us to want to open up and say, what are your thoughts? Because that student might have something or a piece of knowledge that you didn't know, and now you're not the all-knowing expert. That makes that really difficult when we continue to marinate in this idea of perfection. So when we can change our viewpoint to be flexible and being grounded in not knowing all the things. I also do, I'm sure in my bio, I do a lot of executive coaching as well. And so I've had a lot of clients lately from faculty members who are turning into chairs or provosts. And so going into that administrative role is challenging, because sometimes you don't get that training. It's like, you're up, who's the next person in line to be chair? And so everyone gets a turn. And so it's interesting to have conversations with those humans about, gosh, I'm getting all these emails, I don't even know what to do with them. And you know, it doesn't make any sense, and I don't know how to organize myself. And again, that need to be perfect researcher, perfect instructor, perfect administrator, and then forget all the perfect parent, perfect partner, perfect, dog parent, whatever that is for you, perfect caretaker. So we get into this cycle of perfection, and our students do too. Monoculturalism is also an agreement that many of us have, whether we see it or not. And basically what that is that we preserve the Western way of thinking. We preserve what much of the academy is built on, and taking a moment to think about, okay, if you're a history professor, who are the people you are highlighting in your class? Are they women? Are they people of color? Is there indigenous knowings? What are we doing? If let's say you're a math instructor, a math professor, and that is your expertise, there have got to be people out there who fill in some of those spaces, women, people of color, that you can integrate into your coursework as people to highlight, so students can start to see themselves in your coursework, see themselves in the material. I think that's really key here to starting to combat what monoculturalism looks like. And then lastly, another agreement we have in education that affects us all is the agreement of outer work and the importance of outer work. And what does that look like? Well, that looks like constantly publishing, constantly presenting, constantly traveling, constantly doing all of the things, right? And what does that do? It makes us sick. It makes us burnt out. It makes things really hard to be able to go into the classroom and fully engage with students, fully engage with humans who are there trying to learn, who are there to break generational cycles. And it is hard to be present when you are in that space of only looking at outer work. So how do we break that agreement of outer work? We create spaces for ourselves where we can rest. You have the ability to have a say in your contract, add language, talk about and negotiate what that looks like as far as what your outer work looks like and the impact it has in your in-classroom work. So I think that's important to also name in this space. And our students do it too. Think about, I have to get my internship. I have to get my resume together. I have to go and do this study abroad thing and this thing and that thing. It's this constant need to this agreement in education we have around outer work. So when thinking about students of color, students who are different identities, how do we pull all of this together, right? We have all of these agreements of what education is, and what is the effect on that? I look at things like cognitive resources for our students. And when I think about what cognitive resources are needed in order to learn, this is kind of an extension of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And thinking about different areas of the brain that essentially get grayed out because of the different things that our students are experiencing. And when those areas are grayed out, they're not as available to listen, to learn, to take in information, to think critically across all the disciplines and how they're going to apply this wonderful education that you were imparting on them into what's next in their life. That becomes really difficult. Poverty absolutely robs mental bandwidth. When you are worried about where the next meal is coming from, are you going to be able to pay tuition? How many jobs do you have to work this semester in order to pay for housing? It robs students of mental bandwidth to be able to learn in your classroom. Experience of racism and homophobia. So if we're starting to think about the brain here, if you have a student who is dealing with poverty, maybe this part of the brain is kind of grayed out a little bit. And then you have this potential experience of homophobia and racism potentially paired together. We have now part of the a half of our students' brain does not have the cognitive resource to even partake in the educational process. And so it's important that we understand that as educators, because when we develop our syllabi, when we think about grace, when we think about policies and how we approach application and education in our classroom, we have to think of all of these things. And it's a lot. We are in the business of humans, and humans are complicated. And so we have lots of cognitive issues that students are bringing to the table and that we need to know about. And when students are victims of racism and homophobia, they are dealing with an additional type of scarcity around respect, esteem, safety, acceptance, and sometimes violence that's aimed at their identity. And again, it affects our cognitive capacity. Parts of our brain are utilized to worry about things that we just don't have the cognitive capacity to do that. And that, in the end, affects our executive control, our ability to long-term plan, our ability to want to think critically about all the things that we're doing in our life and how that comes together in a potential career. Instead, when you are overcome with all of this and your cognitive capacity is diminished, then it's easier to go play video games. It's easier to just hang out on social media or watch YouTube all day because everything else is just too much. And so that's why, even as faculty, as educators, as scholars, it's important to know and understand the resources that are available on our campuses for our students to help them regain cognitive capacity and executive control so they are able to fully participate in the educational process. So it's a lot. There's a lot of things that are happening in our classrooms and with our students. And so I'm curious if you could just take 2 minutes to write, does this knowledge about learning and about the humans that are learning in your classroom, does it make you feel a little overwhelmed? Why or why not? So you could do a quick write on that. Now I want you to go ahead and take another minute to chat with your neighbor about your thoughts about this knowledge about learning and about what our students are bringing into the classroom. So go ahead and take a minute or two on that. Okay, let's go ahead and bring everybody back. So I want to talk a little more specifically about trauma and trauma and being trauma informed, what trauma is. And in order to do something, we should know what it is and what we're dealing with. And I think on a basic level, we all have an understanding of it because we are humans as well. And we probably all have our own trauma that we've dealt with throughout our life for whatever that is, right? And so this is just a just clear definition from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Association. And so essentially what trauma is defined as events, circumstances that overwhelm our ability to cope. And a large number of students, they report to some degree of exposure of a traumatic event. And for some of them, it's multiple traumatic events. Some of it includes exposure to individual trauma, complex trauma, historical, intergenerational, institutional, persistent trauma. So there's a lot. And then given the context post-COVID-19, as well as all of the social and political upheaval, you know, students are experiencing this heightened levels of uncertainty, of loss, and possible trauma from all of that. And so that is really, really, that's a lot, right? And students in particular, in my experiences working with students in student affairs and dean of students office, having counseling in my portfolio, as well as student health, we really start to see that our students are showing up with the inability to focus, to be attentive, to even be able to retain information. Many times it involves just not coming to class because again, that executive functioning is not there. And so it's good, that overwhelm is going to come up in different places. Challenges with emotional regulation. That is huge right now. I can't tell you how many faculty I've worked with just in this past academic year where they have experienced a severe mental health crisis in their classroom. There's some stuff. And I've been saying lately, COVID-19 has changed us as humans. The experience of that has changed all of us as humans. And for those students who spent a lot of time getting the classroom instruction via Zoom and not having the social interaction, and now they are making their way. Some of them have the part of their collegiate experience doing that, but some of them are making their way from those formative years in high school. Now they're making their way to us. And so we're dealing with more of these mental health challenges. And so there's a lot of anxieties that come up for our students in that space. So it's important that we know what it is. It also can show up as anger, helplessness. It shows up in so many different ways. So again, some of the impacts and the signs of trauma is a student's inability to learn. If your student doesn't feel safe, then it's going to impact how they learn. Difficulty focusing, retaining, recalling information, and then missing classes. And this has been especially impactful to students from lower socioeconomic status, as well as students of color. All right, so it's so hard. Now we need to think about now we know all this information. You're like, oh, I was just trying to teach history, and there is all this stuff I'm dealing with now. There are bright sides to this, right? And the bright sides to this is we can make an impact on humans, on people, and their experience. I know for me, as a first generation college student, I was telling my boss the other day because I asked for a raise. I probably shouldn't have been because I've only been in the position for a year, but one thing that always, every time I ask a supervisor that, or I talk about money, the second part of that sentence is, because I'm my mother's retirement. Right? And I say that because we, as in people of color and come from lower socioeconomic status, that even when you can reach I would say that I have success in my career, there is still a lot of that intergenerational play that I continue to pull with me and hold and hang on to. And so if that's what I'm dealing with at close to a 50-year-old woman, imagine what our young people are dealing with. And some of them are student parents. They're taking care, their caregiving responsibilities. There's just a lot. And so this profession that we're in should have never included a division of, I'm just going to give you information. You're just going to take it, put it in here, regurgitate it back, and learning has happened. When we enter a profession of people, regardless of what type of discipline you have, we have entered into a profession of people, and it comes with all of their stuff, right? And that's okay. We just need to figure out, okay, how does learning happen? And we still help them with the stuff and our own stuff, right? Because we'll get to that too. We need to, again, realize the widespread impact of trauma and understand the potential paths for recovery. So I heard a statistic not long ago that our newer faculty know all the resources on campus. They know where they're at, how to reach them. And as the longer a tenure a person is on a campus, they know less and less of the resources available to students. If that is you, my friends, it is time to have a conversation with your Dean of Students office, to have a conversation with your Vice President of Student Affairs, so that you can know what the resources are that are available to your students. Because when you have them in your back pocket, when your student is not coming to class and you haven't seen them in a week or two, you can pull them out for them too. Or you can put them in your syllabus. And you can be like, y'all, don't forget, there are places you can go. So again, when we know what the trauma potentially is, and we know what resources are available, we have created a pathway for recovery for our student. We can't make the horse drink water, but we can sure try to get them to it. Integrating knowledge about trauma into policies, procedures, and practices. And thinking about this is where sometimes we think about rigor of the academy. Well, sometimes if we lean in on that a little too much, then our students who come in clueless, they are not going to be able to succeed. Because one, they don't have the social concept of what rigor is, and what that looks like, or what that's supposed to look like, or what the expectations are around it. But if we think about, okay, we want this student to learn. It is not about me being a teacher and teaching. It's about learning and being a learner, then we can think about our policies and practices. So does that mean we give a grace period potentially? Maybe we do 2 or 3 days of grace period that you can use anytime unquestioned throughout the semester. And that if you have used up your 3 and you still are not turning in things, then it's a conversation one-on-one with that human where you can say, what else is happening? What else is going on? You may not be the expert to be able to help them with what is happening, but you should be able to do a referral out. And if there isn't a mechanism in which you can do a referral, then that is something to think about when you build referral forms to services, whether it's counseling, dean of students, whoever your hub is on campus, that's who you want to be able to make referrals to help a student get that. You want to recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma in individuals. We just chatted about that. And I think that becomes really obvious, especially even whether they're a high performing student or just a regular student. When you start to see erratic type behaviors, inability to have executive functioning, or just seeing that their head's not there, it's not in the game right now, being able to recognize and do that, you can have a trauma-informed response. And then mostly actively resisting re-traumatization and secondary trauma. Some of our topics are hard, right? If you are I'm just going to pick on psychology for a minute. If you are a psychology professor, there may be some really difficult topics that need to be talked about that may be re-traumatizing to a young person who maybe they don't realize it would be traumatizing. So if you have the opportunity to give a content warning, it doesn't mean you can't teach it, but it just means, hey, I'm going to let you know, we're going to discuss a really difficult topic today. And what is the support mechanism for being able to take in that information and making sure we're not re-traumatizing by saying things like, oh, I don't know if this is the class for you, my friend. Well, why not? Right? Let's not re-traumatize students and create secondary trauma. So some trauma-informed core principles, understanding. If we don't understand trauma, then we may adopt the behaviors and beliefs that are negative and unhealthy. But when we understand it, we can act compassionately. Being compassion. It's overwhelming. It can impact feelings of isolation, betrayal, which may make it difficult to trust others and want to receive that support. But being compassionate can help reestablishing in trusting relationships for our students. Cultural identity and humility, they come from a diverse set of social and cultural groups, and they may experience and react to trauma in very different ways. So it's important that we have cultural humility and responsiveness, and that we take the time to figure out what that means. So it sounds like you are an up and coming HSI. If that is your group, that the population that is coming more to campus, if you don't know a whole lot about Latino students, Latinx students, take some time to educate yourself about the backgrounds and the different identities that we have within the context of that identity, right? Safety, again, trauma can unpredictably violate a student's physical, social, and emotional safety. So it's very helpful to increase that stability and minimize stress reactions. And then collaboration as well, because when we can reestablish agency for our students, it can help them to feel more empowered in the classroom. And then more important, resilience and recovery. And what does resilience look like? It's having that long-lasting broad impact that creates that having more of a strengths-based approach for our students, right? The commentaries that we make on their papers, the way we interact with a student. That's where we can start to build that bridge of resilience and recovery for our students. So a couple of tips that I wanted to give. in order to create this whole, this interactive classroom environment. Again, some general guidelines. What is the expectation these students need to have to be successful in your classroom? Let's be really explicit here, because again, think about Yvonne's rolling up to your classroom, has zero context about what she's supposed to be doing in there. And you're saying this is what you need to be successful, but there's not really a whole, it's a general context. Or maybe you don't give grades until the end of the semester. So then a student has really no idea how they're doing and progressing in the class, because we still have this framework of grades and meritocracy and all these different things. But if we can give some general guidelines of what it takes to be successful in your class, that can go a long way for clueless Yvonne rolling up to your classroom at 18 years old and has no idea how to be successful. But I did have a typewriter. That's important. Provide those campus resources, know where there are, know who those humans are, know how to utilize them, and know how to do referrals. You don't have to be the expert, but know where the experts are and how to get the students there. Consider offering a content warning. Again, that doesn't mean that you can no longer teach something, but if you think it might be triggering to somebody, potentially, especially if maybe you have to do a unit about sexual violence and the impact of that. That could potentially be triggering to somebody. So let's offer potentially a conduct warning or a content warning, and acknowledge trauma and establish that trust with students. That's really, those are some really easy techniques and things that you can do to create that validating educational environment. And again, normalize and validate the lived experience. Some of our students are caretakers, householders, they're working 10 jobs, they're doing all the things. So let's normalize and validate that lived experience, that you're not just a student. Some students are very privileged and can just be a student and come to school and do their thing, and that's it. But that's not everybody's reality. And so we can't operate in the fact that everybody is only coming to class and being a student. Maintain those high expectations. It is okay to say, I'm giving you this feedback on this paper because I know you can meet this expectation. But again, we need to be thoughtful about what the clear pathway is to meet the expectation. If we are not clear, that produces anxiety, and that makes it really hard in order to be able to learn and to participate. Flexibility, again, that we're all human. Flexibility is key. And then I saw a poster presentation about universal design principles. That's a wonderful way to look at your syllabus, how you teach. There's some real opportunities there that can benefit every student, not just students who generally need that, but I think anybody participating in the educational environment can use those concepts. And if we can do that generally, that can be helpful for all. I'm running out of time. So I think the most important thing I also want to talk about is compassion fatigue. Oh man. Yes, I feel this in my bones this time of year. Because for me, that's my whole job is, my husband says that a lot of the things that I do are just, like ridiculous. He's like, your job is just ridiculous. And I'm like, yes, it is. But it's just, like I said, I'm in the business of people, and we're all a little bit ridiculous. And so we're all a little bit drama. We're all a little bit whatever. And that's how I fashioned my career, is working with dean of students offices and the random things that I deal with throughout the year, but especially becomes difficult because it's just been piling on all year. And at the end, it's just always the nuttiest things that happen at that point. But it's very important that you also care for yourself. Remember how we talked at the beginning about that outer work, and this all wraps up again. when we don't care for ourselves, when we only value the outer work, it makes it really hard to be present. It makes it really hard to provide that caring classroom. So it's important that you take care of yourself. Be mindful of events or conversations that are triggering to you. Create that support system. Make time for your own well-being, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be yoga. It doesn't have to be running. It can be ice cream and Real Housewives. It can be, you know, I watch a lot of YouTube sometimes when I'm just like done and I don't want to think, and I need that for me is my well-being. But you also need to be mindful of your own limits, capabilities, and boundaries. And many campuses, I assume yours as well, has a lovely employee assistance program. Utilize it, because sometimes you need to unpack those feelings for yourself. And think about, and you know, I was talking earlier about, you can only do what you're capable, what's capable, what's possible with the resources and capacity that you have, right? So if your budget has been cut by 50%, it's real hard to go and do 110% of the work, because you just don't have capacity. You need to be thoughtful about what your capacity is and be real with yourself about that. Oprah was interviewing Michelle Obama recently, and there was something that she said that I'm like, oh, that hit. You can do it all, but not all at the same time. You know, and that's where, again, we start to think about, what are our priorities in this life? What are the things that are important to us? Yes, our work is important. Yes, it provides our way of feeding ourselves and clothing ourselves, and provides our housing, and it also intrinsic desire and fulfillment as a career, as a life's work. But there are limitations, so it's important you do that. And when you have conversations with students about the things that they're dealing with, the biggest piece of advice I can give to a faculty member is seek to understand, not to commiserate. Ask questions to understand what's happening, but not to also commiserate with that student, because that also pulls at your capacity and creates compassion fatigue. So I think it's really important for you to also think about that, because we're dealing with a lot of stuff. I have a few resources up here that I use throughout the presentation, and I'm happy to send those to Eliza on the back end. And I want to say thank you. I so appreciate this opportunity to speak to you all and to talk to you about creating wholeness and creating that educational environment that all students are excited to be in, and that you're excited to be in. There's a lot of stuff we're dealing with, but we will get through it. It will be okay. We just got to be cognizant of it. And I think if there's anything you can walk away with today, it's knowing and understanding the playing field, so that we are able to move within it and help our students to learn, and help our students to grow. And we ourselves, when we enter a space, knowing that we don't have to be the expert, that we don't have to be perfect, that we don't have to be the all-knowing person, it takes a lot of pressure off of us too. So thank you.